Alright, welcome back. This is an original Tales First story, and it took a turn I didn't expect. Let's get into it.
My parents said, "Don't come to Thanksgiving. Your daughter is embarrassing. Your sister needs a drama-free day." My 6-year-old and I were already on the way to the airport to fly home. I didn't cry. I took action. When my parents saw us again, their faces went pale because I still remember the exact second my stomach dropped, because my hands were on the steering wheel and I had nowhere to put the feeling. We were on the freeway, headed to the airport. It was the day before Thanksgiving. Gray sky. Traffic moving just fast enough to make you think you might actually be on time, which is always how airports lure you into optimism before humbling you at security. My daughter Ivy was in the back in her booster seat, kicking her feet like she had springs in her shoes. She'd been counting down to this trip the way kids do, like it was a holiday and a birthday and a unicorn sighting all rolled into one. "Do you think Mason will play with me this time?" she asked. Mason was my sister Allison's son. He was 7 and treated Ivy like a mildly interesting app he could close whenever he got bored. "I'm sure he will," I said, in the voice mothers use when they're lying for peace. "And Paige is going to show me her new Barbie," Ivy continued, undeterred. Paige was Allison's daughter, 9, and already practicing the kind of facial expressions you see in people who review restaurants for a living. Ivy hummed to herself, hugging the little stuffed fox she'd insisted on bringing so he can have Thanksgiving too. She'd made place cards at school, actual little folded pieces of paper with our names and drawings of turkeys that looked like they'd survived a small explosion. She was excited to see her grandparents. She kept saying Grandma's house like it was a magical location with enchanted snacks. I was hopeful, not in a naive way, more in a maybe this year everyone will behave like adults for 4 hours way, a cautious, fragile optimism, like balancing a glass ornament on a moving bus. My phone rang. The screen lit up with Mom. I smiled automatically, because apparently my nervous system hadn't gotten the memo that I was allowed to be wary. "Hey," I said, tapping the button and putting it on speaker, because I was driving, and also because I'm not trying to get pulled over for holding my phone like a teenager filming a TikTok. "Hi, Sarah," my mother said. Her tone was careful. Too careful, like someone trying to move a vase without letting you hear it scrape. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Ivy was looking out the window, mouth open a little, relaxed, happy. "Hi, Mom," I said, still light. "We're on the way. I think we're going to make it with—" "Listen," she cut in, and my optimism shattered into tiny glittery pieces. There was a pause, just long enough for my brain to go, "Something's wrong." "We've been talking," she said, "and we think it's best if you don't come this year." I actually blinked, like my eyes could reboot the sentence. "What?" I said. "It's just," she continued, like she was explaining the weather. "Your daughter is embarrassing. We don't want her there. Allison needs a drama-free day." There are moments where you can feel your body make a decision without consulting you. Mine decided, right then, that if I stayed on the road, we were going to end up inside someone's trunk. My hands tightened on the wheel. I flicked on my hazards and eased onto the shoulder, half parking, half abandoning the concept of traffic laws out of sheer survival. If my car had feelings, it would have sighed and said, "Here we go." Ivy's voice came from the back seat, small and immediate. "Mom?" I stared straight ahead at the blurred line of the road. My mother was still talking through the speaker, but my brain had zoomed in on one thing. Ivy heard it. The second I realized that, I tapped the screen and took the call off speaker so fast it was basically a reflex, like snatching a knife off the floor before a child steps on it. "Mom," I hissed, because whispering makes everything better, apparently. "I'm driving. Ivy is in the car. We're on the way to the airport." What are you talking about? You heard me, my mother said, and the careful tone vanished like it had never existed. It's better this way. I looked in the mirror again. Ivy wasn't kicking her feet anymore. She was just staring straight ahead, Fox hugged tight to her chest like it was armor. I didn't trust my mouth to stay safe in front of her for even one more sentence. Hold on, I said, clipped. 1 second. Then I leaned back just enough to keep my voice gentle for Ivy. Sweetheart, stay buckled. I'll be right outside the door. Before she could answer, I was already out of the car, door shut, cold air, highway roar, 1 step away from my kid, 1 step closer to the truth. I lifted the phone again. Okay, I said, low and steady. Say it again. My mother didn't even pretend to soften it. Allison doesn't want the stress. She has guests. We're not doing this. Guests, I repeated, and it came out flat. So Ivy is... what? A bad look? My mother made that little irritated noise she makes when I name the thing she's hiding. Don't start. I'm not starting, I said. I'm clarifying. You just told me my 6-year-old is embarrassing. She'll get over it, my mother said, like she was talking about a spilled drink. A car blasted past, wind tugging at my coat. I stared at my own door like it was the only solid thing in the world. We already have flights, I said. 1 sentence. No begging. We're literally on the way? And now you're not, she snapped. Allison needs a drama-free day. There it was again. Drama-free. Like my child was an unregulated substance. I swallowed. So that's it? It's better this way, my mother said, final. We'll see you another time. A pause hung there, just long enough for me to wait for the part where she said, I'm sorry. She didn't. She did what she always did when I didn't immediately fold myself into whatever shape she needed. She ended the call. I stared at the dark screen for half a second, like maybe it would light back up and say, just kidding. I love my granddaughter. I've lost my mind. It didn't. So I did the only thing left. I called the person whose comfort apparently ran the holiday calendar. Allison picked up on the second ring. What? She said, already annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. Breathing, probably. Did you tell Mom not to let us come? I asked. Because of Ivy? A beat, then a sigh. One of those sighs designed to make you feel embarrassing for speaking at all. Sarah, Allison said, I have people coming. People, I echoed. Justin has clients, she added quickly, like that made it noble. Like it was charity work to host Thanksgiving for the commercially important. My stomach went cold. So, you didn't want questions? There was silence, just long enough to count as an answer. Allison's voice sharpened. I don't want a scene. My child exists, I said. That's the scene. You're doing it right now, Allison snapped. This is why nobody can deal with you. You make everything dramatic. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't try to teach empathy to someone who treated it like an elective. Okay, I said, and my voice was calm enough that even I didn't recognize it. Got it. And I ended the call before she could reply. I stood there on the shoulder of the freeway for a few more seconds, because I needed to breathe. Then I opened the door and climbed back in. Ivy's eyes flicked to my face immediately, searching for clues the way kids do when they don't have words yet. I forced my face into calm, the kind of calm mothers learn in hostage situations. Hey, I said softly. Ivy didn't hesitate. They don't want me. My throat tightened. I had a sudden, vivid urge to scream into the steering wheel, but Ivy was watching me, and I had one job. No, I said automatically. Don't lie, Ivy said, voice wobbling. I heard it. Grandma said I'm embarrassing. I sat back and stared at the highway. My hazards blinked, steady and bright, like my car was quietly calling for help. I'm sorry, I said, and it came out rough. Ivy hugged her stuffed fox tighter, like she could protect it from shame. I stared at the airport signs in the distance, and I realized something with a kind of stunned clarity. I could still make this day about us. I turned the car around. Ivy didn't say anything for a while. That was the scariest part. A quiet 6-year-old is never a good sign. I drove us to an ice cream shop because I didn't know what else to do with a broken heart and a child who still believed in grandparents. Pick whatever you want, I said. 2 scoops. She looked at me. Even sprinkles? Especially sprinkles, I said. We sat by the window. Ivy stared at her sundae and didn't eat it. Then I noticed the table next to us, an older couple, their daughter, and a little girl about Ivy's age. They were just together. Easy. Like nobody had to earn their place. My throat tightened. I looked away fast, like that would stop it. It didn't. The older woman leaned over, gentle. Hey, are you okay? I opened my mouth to say, fine. Nothing came out. Ivy sniffed beside me, quiet, like she was trying to be small enough to not cause trouble. The older woman looked from Ivy to me and softened. Would you two like to sit with us? Before I could answer, their little girl slid off her chair and walked over to Ivy. I'm Mia, she said. Do you like unicorns? Ivy blinked. Yeah. Come on, Mia said, and Ivy followed her to the play corner like her body remembered how to be a kid. The older woman smiled. I'm Barbara. This is Walter, and that's our daughter, Julia. Sarah, I said. And Ivy. Barbara didn't lean in like we were about to do a deep dive. She just nodded toward the play corner where Ivy and Mia were already arguing over a plastic spoon like it mattered. She's got a good kid vibe, Barbara said, like that was all she needed to know. Walter slid a napkin toward me without making it a thing. Small gesture. Big impact. Julia gave me a quick, sympathetic look and said, holidays can be a lot. I let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. That's one way to put it. Barbara watched me for a second, quiet, not nosy, and asked gently, Are you okay? I should have said yes. I should have said, just tired, and moved on like I always do, but my mouth betrayed me. Not really, I admitted. And then, because the dam was already cracked, one sentence slipped out. We were supposed to fly home for Thanksgiving, and my mom called and told us not to come. Barbara's expression changed. Not dramatic, just immediate. Because of Ivy? Julia asked, softly, like she already knew the answer, but didn't want to assume. I stared at my hands. Yeah. Walter's jaw tightened. Barbara's voice dropped, careful. What did she say? I hesitated. Then I swallowed. That Ivy was embarrassing. Nobody spoke for a beat. Barbara didn't ask for a life story. She didn't demand details. She just said, quietly, like she couldn't help it. How could anyone say that about a child? And that was the problem. Because the real answer wasn't one sentence. It wasn't just one phone call. And I had no idea where to even start. Barbara and Walter were watching me like they were waiting for the rest of the story, and I realized I'd never actually said it out loud to people who weren't already committed to misunderstanding me. So I did what I always do when I'm about to say something painful. I made a joke. My family's big on tradition, I said, like turkey and stuffing and pretending I don't exist unless my sister needs an audience. Julia let out a short laugh that sounded like it surprised her, like she recognized the coping mechanism. Barbara didn't laugh. Not because she didn't get it, because she got it too well. You have a sister, she said. Older, I said. Allison. Just saying her name made my shoulders tighten. Allison was the right daughter, the one who didn't cause problems, mostly because she never had to ask for anything. It was handed to her like a crown. Growing up, Allison's achievements were framed. Mine were acknowledged, if nobody was busy. If Allison got an A, my parents said, "That's our girl." If I got an A, my parents said, "Good, keep it up." If Allison cried, the house rearranged itself around her. If I cried, my parents said, "Don't start." As adults, Allison married Justin, a man my parents approved of like they were on the judging panel of a reality show called America's Next Acceptable Son-in-Law. Justin shook hands like he meant it. He wore button-down shirts. He laughed at my dad's jokes. He fit into my parents' world like a puzzle piece they'd ordered online. Allison had Mason and Paige, and my parents turned into the kind of grandparents you see in commercials. The kind who baked cookies and posted pictures and wrote captions about blessings. When Mason was born, my mother announced it like the royal family had produced an heir. When Ivy was born, my mother said, "Well, that's going to be hard." I didn't say that to Barbara and Walter. Not yet. Because the thing is, my parents weren't villains in a movie twirling mustaches. They weren't cruel every second. They could be sweet sometimes, in small, confusing bursts. A birthday card, a toy mailed once, a "tell Ivy I love her" tacked onto the end of a phone call like a spare thought. Just enough to keep me hoping. Just enough to keep me trying. Ivy's father, my ex, was a relationship I thought would become a life. He smiled in photos. He could be charming in public. And then, quietly, behind closed doors, the charm curdled. I won't go into details, you don't need them. What matters is, it became abusive. And one night I packed a bag, buckled a much smaller Ivy into her car seat, and drove to my parents' house because I genuinely thought this is what family is for. I pictured a door opening and my mother pulling me in and saying, "You're safe." What I got was my mother looking at the bag and saying, "Are you sure?" And my father, half awake, blinking at me like I'd shown up with a raccoon. "He seemed fine," my mother said. "You've always been sensitive, Sarah." Sensitive. Another family motto. I told them the truth as carefully as I could. I said, "He's not who you think he is." And my mother said, "Don't dramatize." They let us stay. That's the part I used to focus on, like it excused everything else. But staying felt like living inside a warning label. Nobody screamed at me. Nobody threw us out in the snow. It was subtler than that. It was the way my mother would sigh when Ivy cried like the sound was personally offensive. It was the way my father would look at the TV when I talked, as if eye contact might obligate him to care. It was the way my mother would say things like, "You know it's going to be harder doing this alone," and "It's a shame things didn't work out," as if the problem was the aesthetic of my life, not the safety of it. Once, I said, quietly, carefully, that I was relieved I wasn't married to him. I meant it practically. Divorce is expensive and exhausting. My mother stared at me like I'd confessed to a crime. "Families figure it out," she said. "People don't just leave." I remember thinking, yes, they do. I just did. But I didn't say that. I swallowed it. I told myself my mother was old-fashioned. I told myself she didn't understand abuse. I told myself she wanted what was best. I told myself a lot of things. Then came the part that made everything crystal clear in hindsight. One afternoon, my mother mentioned company coming over. People from church. Neighbors. Nice people. And she said, "Why don't you take Ivy out for a bit?" Not because Ivy needed fresh air, because my mother didn't want to explain me. I took Ivy to a park and watched her wobble on a slide and thought, at least she's happy. I told myself it was temporary. It was always temporary, until it wasn't. I started applying for jobs like my life depended on it, because it kind of did. My parents didn't say, "You have to leave." They said things like, "So what's your plan?" And "You can't stay here forever." And "You don't want to get stuck." Eventually, I got a job offer, a decent one, but it was far enough that visiting meant planning, tickets, the whole production. I remember standing in the kitchen with the offer letter in my hand, Ivy on my hip, and saying, "It's really far. I think I should keep looking for something local, just a little longer." I expected my parents to say, "Of course, we can help. Stay. Find the right thing." My mother didn't even hesitate. "A job is a job," she said. "You don't turn that down." "You can't be picky," my father added, without looking up. "You don't want to be stuck here forever," my mother said, and the words landed like a door closing. So I took the job. I moved. I built a life far away. I told myself it was independence. And it was, but it was also exile with better branding. Despite everything, Ivy kept asking about her grandparents, mostly because other kids talked about theirs, and she wanted to belong. So when my mother called her embarrassing, it didn't just hurt me. It hit Ivy. And that was the final straw. I could swallow shame aimed at me, but I wasn't going to teach my daughter to swallow it too. That's why, sitting in that ice cream shop, watching Ivy play with Mia, I finally let myself see the truth. It didn't have to be like this. And when Barbara said, "Come to our Thanksgiving tomorrow," I understood it wasn't pity. It was a door. I went. Not because I wasn't terrified, because Ivy deserved a holiday where she wasn't treated like a problem to manage. Barbara's house smelled like actual Thanksgiving. Roasting turkey, butter, cinnamon, something baking that made the whole place feel warm before anyone even spoke to you. Walter opened the door with a grin like we were expected, not accommodated. "Sarah," he said, like my name belonged in his house. "You made it." Ivy hovered behind me at first, clutching her stuffed fox like a shield. Then Mia appeared and said, "You're here!" Like it was the best news of her life. Ivy's shoulders dropped 1 inch, then another. Barbara handed me a glass of something warm and said, "Kitchen's that way. Shoes wherever. You're family today." Family today. That phrase could have been corny. Coming from Barbara, it felt like truth. Ivy and Mia disappeared into a room full of toys, and I stood there in the entryway with my coat still on, blinking like someone who'd walked into the wrong movie. Then my phone buzzed. I checked it quickly, out of habit. Like maybe the universe would send me an apology text and I could go back to believing in magic. It was Facebook. And there it was. A photo of my parents at the table with Allison and Justin, Mason and Paige, all smiling, posed, perfect. The kind of picture that screams, "We are grateful. We are blessed. We are also very good at angles." The caption was something about family and nothing like time with the grandkids. Hearts, comments, people saying, "So beautiful," and "Love this." There was no mention of me, no mention of Ivy, not even a polite lie like missing someone, just clean erasure. I stared at it for a long second, and something in me went very still. Not sad, not shocked, just done. I slid my phone back into my pocket and walked into Barbara's kitchen, where Julia was stirring something on the stove and Walter was carving something like he took it personally. Barbara glanced at my face and didn't ask. She just nudged a plate toward me and said, "Sit, eat while it's hot." And here's the thing. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, because I finally understood that my tears were wasted on people who used them as proof I was dramatic. So I took action. It wasn't dramatic action. It wasn't revenge. It was a quiet internal decision so firm it felt like steel. Ivy would never audition for love again. Later, while we were eating, Ivy leaned toward me and asked, very softly, "Mom, do you think Grandma will ever want me?" My fork paused in midair. Across the table, Barbara didn't look at me. She didn't need to. I could feel her listening. I forced my voice into calm. "You are not the problem," I said. "Not ever." Ivy nodded like she wanted to believe me, but wasn't sure she was allowed to. Julia reached over and slid Ivy an extra roll. No fuss. No poor baby. Just, "Here. You're included." After Thanksgiving, my parents didn't text. I didn't text. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. It wasn't a dramatic cutoff. It was mutual silence that proved how conditional my place in that family had always been. If I wasn't showing up to be managed, nobody came looking. Meanwhile, Sunday dinners at Barbara and Walter's became normal. Every week, 5 o'clock. Like a standing appointment with safety. Slowly, Ivy's drawings started appearing on their fridge. A kid cup stayed in the cabinet like it lived there. Mia would save Ivy a seat without being told. Walter would ask Ivy about school like her answer mattered. One Sunday, Ivy spilled apple juice on the table. I flinched. Because my body still expected sighs and eye rolls, and honestly, Sarah. Barbara just grabbed a towel and said, "It's a table. It's been through worse." Walter nodded solemnly. "I once spilled gravy on a Thanksgiving centerpiece in 1998. The family survived." Ivy giggled. A real giggle. Dry humor is how I survived my childhood. Warm humor is how Ivy was healing. And then, one afternoon, it happened. Ivy was running toward Barbara in the kitchen, arms open, and she shouted, "Grandma Barbara!" I stopped breathing. Because I expected correction. I expected discomfort. I expected someone to say, "Oh no, sweetheart, I'm not your—" Barbara turned, opened her arms, and said, "There's my girl." Just like that. Walter looked up from the newspaper and said, "Hey, kiddo." And Ivy beamed. I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror for a full minute because my eyes were wet and I was furious at how unfair it was that love could be that easy if people simply chose it. That week, I updated the documents that mattered. School pickup, emergency contacts, medical permissions, and a guardianship plan. Quiet, legal, permanent. If anything happened to me, Ivy would go to Barbara and Walter. Not my parents, not Allison, not Justin. It was the most adult sentence I'd ever written, and my hand didn't shake once. Julia and I got closer too. Not in a sit and discuss our feelings for 3 hours way. In a real-life way. We swapped childcare once. Then again, we vented while the kids played. It started to feel like sisterhood, without either of us naming it. Then Julia invited me to a single-parent play meetup she ran once a week at a community center. "It's low stakes," she promised. "Kids play. Adults pretend they remember how to socialize." That sounded like my kind of nightmare, so I went. And that's where I met Lucas. He walked in with a little boy, Leo, who had a cowlick and the serious expression of a child evaluating whether this place had snacks. Lucas wasn't flashy. He didn't walk in like he was auditioning to be everyone's favorite dad. He just noticed things. He held the door for a mom juggling a stroller. He picked up a dropped sippy cup like it wasn't beneath him. He nodded at Ivy like she was a person, not an accessory to me. It didn't happen all at once. Lucas became a steady part of our routine, then our life. Ivy and Leo clicked. Sundays at Barbara and Walter's became normal. A year passed, quiet, solid, and somehow, without fanfare, we ended up planning a wedding. 1 year after the Thanksgiving that started it all, my life looked nothing like it used to. I was engaged to Lucas. Ivy had Leo and Mia like built-in best friends. Barbara and Walter weren't nice people we met once. They were family. My biological family had been silent for a year, so when Mom's name lit up my phone, I stared at it like it might bite. Lucas looked up. "You okay?" "Define okay," I said, and answered. "Sarah," my mother said, careful, controlled. The same tone from the highway. "I hear you're getting married." "Yeah." A beat. Then the real reason. "Where is our invitation?" I kept my voice calm. "You're not invited." Silence. Then outrage, like I'd broken a law. "What do you mean you're not inviting us?" "I mean exactly that." "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "What was ridiculous," I said, "was you calling my 6-year-old embarrassing." "Don't start," she warned. I almost laughed. Muscle memory. "I'm not starting," I said. "I'm finishing." She hung up. Then the pressure came in waves. Calls, texts, relatives I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly discovering my number like it was a hobby. "You can't not invite your parents. Be the bigger person. Family is family." I explained once. One sentence to one person. "They rejected Ivy. She heard it." The line went quiet after that. Then the voicemail arrived. "We're coming anyway," my mother said, tight and satisfied, like she'd solved a problem. Allison texted, "You're being dramatic. This is why nobody can deal with you." Lucas listened to it all, jaw tight. "You're not crazy," he said quietly. "Thank you," I said. "I'd like that embroidered on a pillow." We arranged security for the wedding. One rule, no exceptions. No one approaches Ivy. Wedding day arrived. I was getting ready with Julia fussing over a curling iron, Barbara fixing Ivy's dress, and Walter standing nearby pretending he wasn't emotional. Ivy spun. "Do I look fancy?" "You look like trouble," Julia said fondly. "The best kind." Barbara smiled at Ivy. "Our girl." Walter cleared his throat. "Ready, kiddo?" Then the coordinator stepped in. "Sarah, your parents are here, and your sister's family." My pulse spiked. Lucas was instantly beside me. "Want them removed?" I looked at Ivy. Bright dress, little bracelet, 6-year-old heart still healing. I wasn't risking a shouting match with Ivy within earshot. "No," I said. "Let them in. Back row. Away from Ivy. If they move toward her, stop them." The coordinator nodded and disappeared. Walter offered his arm. His hand was steady. That was the whole point. I stepped into the aisle. They were in the back. My mother stiff, my father shrinking, Allison scanning the room like it was a performance review, Justin leaning back like he belonged, Mason and Paige bored already. My biological father didn't stand. Walter did. Walter walked me down the aisle like he was honored to be there, like I mattered. Lucas waited at the altar, eyes locked on me, the kind of gaze that says, "I choose you. I choose your child." And we got married. My biological family watched from the back like people who'd shown up too late to matter. At the reception, Ivy was safe at the kids' table with Mia and Leo. That was all I cared about. Then the DJ tapped the mic. "If I can have everyone's attention." My stomach tightened. Not fear. Anticipation. Because I'd planned this part. I took the microphone. "Thank you," I said, "for being here." I paused. Then I said it. Calm, clear, impossible to ignore. A year ago, I was told not to come to Thanksgiving because my child was too much. A hush moved through the room. That call didn't take something from us. It showed me where we actually belonged. I turned toward Barbara and Walter. "Barbara, Walter, you made room for us when you didn't have to. You loved Ivy like she wasn't a burden, like she was exactly what she is, an incredible kid." The room erupted. Applause, whistles, people standing. Barbara stood, overwhelmed. Walter stood beside her, face red and proud. "Julia," I added, "you became the sister I always needed." More applause. Then I looked at the back row. My mother's face had gone blank. Allison looked stunned. Justin's smile was gone. My father stared at his hands. Their faces were pale because now the room knew. Now the story belonged to me. I handed the mic back and stepped into Lucas's arms. For one perfect second, it was mine. Then my mother shoved her way through the crowd. "What did you just say?" she hissed. "The truth," I said. "You humiliated us," she snapped. "You humiliated a 6-year-old. I'm just matching energy," I replied. Her eyes flashed. "That's my granddaughter." I kept my voice low. "You rejected her." "We did not," she started. "Stop," I said, and the word landed like a door closing. "You said she was embarrassing." She tried the last weapon she had. "You can't keep her from us. We have rights." And that's when I dropped it. "If anything happens to me," I said evenly, "Ivy goes to Barbara and Walter, not you." My mother actually staggered. "You... what?" "You're not listed anywhere that matters," I said softly. My father's eyes filled. Allison looked furious. My mother spun toward Ivy like she could still reclaim something. "There you are," she called, voice suddenly sweet. "Come here, sweetheart." Security appeared instantly and blocked her. Walter stepped in too, quiet, immovable. Julia was already moving Ivy away. Barbara reached her first, calm and practiced, like this wasn't the first time she'd protected a child from grown-up chaos. My mother's voice rose. "This is my family." Walter's voice stayed low. "Not today." I looked at my mother and felt something settle. Calm. Final. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "I've just stopped waiting for you to be different." Then I nodded to security. "Please escort them out." They were removed. My mother kept looking back like she expected me to chase her. I didn't. I crouched in front of Ivy. "You okay?" Ivy frowned. "Was that Grandma?" "That was someone who doesn't get to hurt you anymore," I said. Ivy blinked, then asked, "Can I have cake now?" I let out a shaky laugh. "Absolutely." And I went back to my wedding. The next morning, my phone was full of messages from people who cared more about tradition than a child's feelings. I deleted them. Then one message came in from Aunt Denise. "I heard what happened. I'm proud of you. Protect Ivy. You're doing the right thing." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "Thank you." And for the first time in my life, I meant it when I thought, I'm free. So what do you think? Did I go too far? Or was this the only way to protect Ivy? Tell me in the comments and subscribe for more stories.